Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski and I'll be your host for today, as per usual. And before we start, let me just remind you these are the 10 episodes for our 10th season, which is all about book reviews. So I have prepared 10 books for you to hear about. Some of those ideas might be a bit of a spoiler alert. But for the most part, I'm trying to give you some insightful thoughts and ideas from myself as I've read those books and interacted with them, and hopefully inspire you to read them for yourselves as well. So, this is not to say that after listening to this podcast, you know everything about the book and you should never pick it up. Quite the contrary. So, other than that, if you'd like to engage with the podcast or show me some support, that's always welcome. Feel free to like, share, subscribe. Share it with a friend. I think that's the best kind of help actually. And if you'd like to support me financially, to buy me a coffee, the link is below for you to follow. Other than that, enjoy the show. I hope that this book, which I'll introduce in a second, will be an interesting one for you to pick up and interact with. And I hope that this is just another of those moments when you'll get to come out a bit wiser and maybe more inspired after the episode. This is why I am here for you. So today we're gonna be discussing our, I think, 8th book of the season, and I've decided after long consideration to introduce a book by Tim Tamashiro, How to Ikigai. How to Ikigai by Tim Tamashiro. And maybe just a quote from the book to give you an insight into what the book might be about as we dive into it, is learn to do what you love, do what you are good at, do what the world needs, and do what you can be rewarded for. And hence, you will find your Ikigai. So, all right. First of all, why did I choose this book? I've read it, I think, at the very beginning of the summer this year, and it's actually quite short in comparison to the majority of books we've discussed before. This one is a light read, so if you're just getting started with your reading sprees and you're not so sure whether or not you want to dive into books such as the ones from before, or maybe Meditations from Marcus Aurelius seems a bit too daunting, this is definitely an easy book to start with, and it might actually be quite fun to start with because it also offers a bunch of practical and maybe fun to engage with activities that are not necessarily only for you to read, but also, practice really. And we'll get to that in a second. But the book itself is written very, very simply, not in a sense that the words are simple, rather it's straightforward. And it's definitely aimed to grasp and be grasped by all the readers out there, including younger generations and those who are just starting on their reading journeys. So, I would definitely recommend you check it out. There's gonna be a link below, as always, for you to look it up. So, what is Ikigai, and where did it come from? According to the book, the concept of Ikigai is a concept developed on the island of Okinawa in Japan. And Ikigai, the simplest way to sort of define it is your life's purpose at an intersection of 4 spaces that I've just mentioned before, right? So this is what you love, what you are good at, what you do that the world needs, and what you do that you can be rewarded for. And on the intersection of those 4 spaces, 4 factors, you can find your life's purpose, your Ikigai. So, Yeah, before we dive deeper into it, I will just say, for me, the book was very, very entertaining, and quite frankly, I found it to be one of those things that I've had fun with, and I've done my own little drawings and figure out my own things, trying to come up with those solutions that we'll talk about, and yeah, I think it's an interesting one to explore. So, first of all, um, something that popped up very, very quickly in the book for me is the fact that the same as with anything else you decide to do in the world, whether it is podcasting or reading more or brushing your teeth, it is very much so a daily practice, right? It's not something that comes around one day and it's there. You don't have a full podcast of episodes in one day, and you don't really rid yourself from all the illnesses of your teeth if you've never brushed your teeth before in one day. It takes time, so it's a practice. And the first part here that I would like to consider and for you to get inspired with is this idea of finding some ideas and maybe coming up with a bunch of answers to those questions. What can you do that you're good at? What do you love to do? What can you do that the world needs? And what can you do that you can be rewarded for? And just write them all down to give yourself inspiration and ideas to start with. If you want to at least try, because this is not to say that you will find it so easily. I certainly didn't. But if you want to attempt finding your Ikigai and attempt finding some new meaning in your life, it might be very, very useful to write those ideas down and to come up with a bunch that seem to be interlinking those spaces. So, for example, if you like reading like myself, that might be something you love to do, but it might not necessarily be something that the world needs, in a sense that they will, for whatever reason, pay me to read. But what comes out of reading, for example, I don't know, if I end up teaching something that I've read, similarly to what I'm doing on a podcast from time to time, it does seem to be much closer to this, what the world might need, what some people might need, and also what I might be rewarded for, right? So, don't discourage yourself and don't catch yourself stopping writing because this is not something people will like or this is not something you're that great at. The first step is to just figure out a list. There's going to be 4 lists realistically of the things that you might find to fit those. And an interesting thing to point out is the things will differ in your lifespan, in the time of your life. I think even in the time of your day, you might find that some things sound more silly and some things sound more appropriate than others. And also they will differ depending on your character and on your hobbies and expectations of the world and ideas. So there is no one size fit all, and I cannot give you a list to just use. You have to figure it out for yourself, but it can be quite fun. And this is the first part of the book in terms of what Tim Tamashiro talks about, to find and to engage with a bunch of different ideas and see what sticks. An interesting thing that I remember from the book is that, if you know what's a gap year, like if you take a gap year from school or if you take a gap year from work, to, I don't know, some people do that to take care of their kids, some people do that to travel the world, some people just do that to sort of reorganize their life and figure out what they would like to do next. This is what Mr. Tamashiro points out as an idea of a sort of Ikigai year, to give yourself a year off work or off study and just engage in all of those things you've written on your list and see whether or not some of them might be fitting to be, actively engaging with over time. Of course, this is easier said than done, I think. For me, it's not realistic to abandon all work and for a year not do anything at all. But for some people, it might be possible. So it's for sure something to consider and worth mentioning. Secondly, second main point that I would like to point out to you is the idea of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you remember that, this is sort of a pyramid of needs by Maslow, one of the psychologists and philosophers of the past. And this hierarchy of needs, sort of puts in perspective what humans need on a daily basis, and those needs might be some of them might be more important than others, and once you fulfill the most essential ones, you can go higher up the ladder. It's a sort of a pyramid kind of a shape, at least that's the drawing I remember. And at the very top of this hierarchy of needs, there is the space for self-fulfillment, right? The individual's ability to fulfill their own, potential. And of course, yet again, considering the pyramid and considering building it up, I doubt many people think about self-fulfillment when they're struggling to find shelter or they're struggling to find food for the table for the next day. But assuming you are among those privileged ones, really, if you think about it, to have all the basic needs met and you're climbing up that pyramid, that ladder of your needs, you might end up being privileged enough and blessed enough to be figuring out your self-fulfillment. And this is where Ikigai can be of great help and a space for you to practice and engage with that. So the idea and maybe the invitation here is to, first of all and foremost, recognize how privileged and how blessed you are to be listening to this, because there is right now so much, and always have been, I think, bad things happening around the world. Like, some people are genuinely in a war zone. Some people might be struggling to get the next meal. There is still quite an extreme poverty in many countries worldwide. And ourselves, the ones that are privileged enough to not have to worry about that. And for example, I do consider myself maybe not a rich man, but definitely rich man in terms of the privilege that I have of having a safe space, being able to engage with my hobbies and my passions. I can learn, I can get to the next day without worrying whether I will have a meal on the table. I have a lot of friends and family around me to support me. So I'm very privileged in that regard, and I recognize it, and I would like you to also take a moment here to just notice how much you have and how much you could be grateful for in terms of the fact that you're even listening to a podcast. Think of just how many people are not in a position to listen to a podcast because they just don't have those means. They might not have a computer, they might not have a phone. So, once we take that blessing and move forward, consider what self-fulfillment would mean to you. And yet again, it might be a worthy exploration to come back to your childhood or to your earlier time of your life and see what was important for you back then, and maybe what you wanted to be when you grow up. That's such a fun thing, right? Sometimes a bit daunting. Sorry for the ambulance. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's quite loud. Um, I remember that at the at different stages of my childhood, I wanted to be a different person, right? There was always a talk of being a grown up, of course, because for whatever reason, as long as we're kids, we want to grow up. And when we actually grow up, we're like, well, no, thank you. Maybe that's not what I want. But definitely there were many different stages of my life that I wanted to be self fulfillment meant different things to me. Like there was definitely a time when it was a football player, and then it was like a rock star. I wanted to be a soldier. I wanted to be a space a cadet. um, Such a bunch of different things. I wanted to be like my father, then I wanted to be like my mom and have our pharmacy, and then I thought about being like an actor, and it's just these will change over time, right? But these can be great clues for you to just engage in a fun play to start with, and to see what sticks, because you might actually still have that a proneness to be a drawing expert, or maybe you should pick up that banjo and play again, and see how that goes. And maybe you used to write poetry, and you can go back to it and see how you feel right now about it. It doesn't have to be anything artistic as well. It can be anything at all. And I think this is the space, once you're considering that self-fulfillment, that ikigai for yourself, to engage with that, and to see what would that mean to you, and just think things over, see for yourself. And the last thing I wanted to share with you today, and maybe ponder for a moment, is that what I found when I was searching for my ikigai, right, and engaging with the book, is that there are a bunch of examples throughout the book that point out how different the ikigai might be from what we think it is. So let me elaborate. For example, there was a story in the book of like a dragon slayer, a sort of a knight, I think, whose ikigai seemed to be to slay dragons, right? To conquer the utmost evil, to take care of the evil of this world. And as the story continued, there was it was sort of a fairy tale story, and then at some point, at the very end of it all, there was a sort of a conclusion. In the midst of it, the dragon slayer met a child, and sort of took care of the child as they went forth to slay the dragon. And then the dragon was nowhere to be found, but there was this sort of conclusion that the ikigai wasn't actually to slay dragons, it was to take care of others and to defend others from dragons. So, it sort of seems like it's the same thing, right? If you slay a dragon, then you took care of someone by slaying that dragon. But the way where you position your focus about it does make a big difference, I think. Because one of them depends on you chasing those dragons, whereas the other one depends on you focusing, how can I take care of those around me? And I wrote some examples here for myself, how I was thinking about those things when I was writing my different answers and engaging with them. And one that popped up for me was, like, for example, your ikigai might be to make movies or to make some sort of documentaries, but it can also be to inspire, entertain, and educate. Your ikigai might be to build great computers, but it can also be to help others engage with technology much more efficiently. So this is not to say that one is wrong and the other one is right. This is more to say that at the very end of your process, when you do have a bunch of Ikigai ideas and you're thinking which one and which with to engage, it might be worth just flipping it upside down or looking at it from a different perspective just to see how it would sound. Because to me personally, it does sound much more appealing to think that my Ikigai would be to take care of others and defend others than to say to slay dragons. I mean, it puts a lot of a strain on my ability to find dragons in the first place, and it's much more, in a way, I think, negatively driven, right? If you define yourself by what you're trying not to be, fair enough, it might be practical, but it can also sound a bit rough. I don't know, you might as well define yourself through what you would like to be, the positive. At least this is my humble opinion here. But yeah, the idea that, as you go and you write down a few ideas and then you find out which of those ideas might be interlinking those 4 areas of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be rewarded for. Once you have some ideas of those, maybe write it down, my Ikigai is blah blah blah, and then see, can you put it in a different form, different sentence, upside down, or shift the focus so it's no longer the focus on the dragon but on the person you're saving from the dragon. And yeah, this is basically this idea that at the very end of your process, you might find that what you've been searching for is sort of hidden underneath what you thought you've been looking at. So it's an exercise for sure, and more mindful one for certain as well. So the author of the book obviously points out again and again that it might be very beneficial to engage with this idea over time, not rush it, but to engage with it with a sort of mindfulness practice. Maybe have a piece of paper and a pen with you as you go about your day, and try to pay attention to your feelings, to your states, to what inspires you and resonates with you, and write it down. And then at the very end of the week, you might collect all of those and look at them and see what seems to be your Ikigai. So yeah, I think at this point I will not say more, because also the book is relatively short, so in comparison to others I don't want to give you too much. But yeah, the challenge and the invitation for you for this week, apart from recognizing how grateful and privileged you are for being able to listen to this podcast in the first place, is to figure out your Ikigai. Maybe to ponder it a little bit, to think about your personal traits, your hobbies, your character strengths, and see what sticks, what seems to be coming out. Maybe you already know it. Maybe you're already engaging with your Ikigai and you just don't know. But it's definitely a fun adventure to take forth and engage with. So yeah, other than that, I think we can leave it there for now. I hope that you've enjoyed the episode. I'm wishing you a great week. I will be back next week with the next episode, and so forth, as per usual. Feel free to reach out. It's a pleasure, and I hope that the Ikigai I've written down in connection to my podcast is actually the right one. Time will tell. And stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.